In this clip, we're going to start modeling leaves for our tree. So here I'm back in 3ds Max, and this time I have decided to use a reference picture before I start modeling. And just to make the tree even more interesting and stylized, I decided to give it maple leaf. But we're going to make him a little bit quirky, a little bit different, just to make it a little bit more interesting and different. So this is going to be the most unidentified tree in the world. So let's go ahead and start. So I got the reference picture here, just like we did in previous modules when I would, create a square picture, a square plane and add a picture to it. And you can find this image in the reference folder. And I got the material assigned over here. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create another plane right in front, right here. I'm going to make sure I'm in shaded mode instead of realistic because I don't want any shadows at this point. I'm going to click Alt and X. Right click and convert to editable poly. So at this point, I'm just going to basically move these vertices to match the leaf as much as I can, just so I get all the borders in and don't have too much of extra space here. That should be just fine. And now I'm going to grab a cut tool and I'm going to start cutting in. As you can see, there's quite a few little details here, but I want to avoid most of them because I don't want a leaf to look too real. So I'm just going to go ahead and start modeling. So essentially what I'm doing is just cutting it out. And if you wanted to go very stylized, you could really just go ahead in Photoshop and draw a leaf instead and go with that. But I still prefer to add a little bit of 3D to my leaves. So I'm going to use a reference image here, created in 3D, just so I have a little bit more in the normal map. So here I got half of the leaf done. I'm just going to select this side now. And I don't want to symmetry it because it might look a little bit too weird. So I'm going to go in here and I'm only doing it semi-final. What I usually prefer to do is when I texture, I prefer to add a little bit more to the mask of the leaf. And of course, you're not going to be using the actual 3D leaves for a game mesh. You would bake that down into a sheet. And I'm just going to go in here, add a little bit more curve. And again, I'm trying to avoid most of the smaller detail. Go in here and it gets a little buggy at this point, but it shouldn't be a big problem. So now I'm just going to select the polygons and delete the outer rim here. And I'm also going to grab this stem here and just hold shift and extend it a few times. That is perfect. So at this point, I'm just going to hold 2 of these vertices and connect as many of them as I can, just to make sure that my geometry doesn't completely fall apart. And again here, and I'm going to select the outer rim here, hold shift and drag it in a little bit. And at this point, I can go in and actually delete these parts here. And I'm going to cap again and click cap. And I'm going to select this polygon here and just click inset just a little bit right about here and do it twice. That is perfect. And now I can delete the outer rim again. It's sort of a repetitive process here. Add shell, extend it a little bit. That looks pretty good. And going back to editable poly, and I'm just going to connect again the vital points here. So these ones, and the vital points are basically the choke points because you don't want these polygons to extend outwards. So if you just sort of connect the most brutal vertices here, the rest can have a little bit of artifacts. It shouldn't be a big deal. Here we go. And just grab this one. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and just click Alt X again to make it visible. And I'm just going to add turbo smooth a few times. And as you can see, we have a few artifacts here. Let's just go ahead and see if we can clear those up. And if we can't, it's not a big deal. Just connect these. This is a pinch here. That is perfect. Got any more? As long as basically the vertices don't overlap, you shouldn't have any problems like that. Too much here, so I'm just going to grab here. And there's one big one over here. Let's just see if we can fix that. So I'm just going to grab these vertices here, move them around. And this is basically just a really basic cutout. Nothing fancy. So that looks pretty good to me. And as you can see, it's a little bit mushy, but don't forget that this is just for the normals purposes. What I would do is in the texture, I would add a nice stylized stem to it and things like that. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the FFD 4x4 and select the inside 4 vertices here and just extend it to make it a little bit thicker. And as you can see, our stem gone a little bit too wild here. So I'm just going to go back here. I'm just going to add a few loops. So I'm just going to go to Edit, Insert Swift Loop. Just going to add a few over here. And also I'm going to select the vertices and just make it a little thicker. It's a little too thin, I think. Maybe add one more loop right at the end here. So I'm going to make sure that I select all my polygons here and go back to my FFD. Let's make sure it's still thick. Perfect. That is perfect leaf. The last thing I want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add bend and just control the angle. Make sure it's on X here. Just give it a little bit more surface definition here. That looks about right. And you can play with the center. That is perfect. That is our leaf. So this is it for this clip. In the next clip, let's go ahead and create a branch and distribute the leaves around it.